I never thought I'd see the day when Sandra Wilkins, our HOA president, would be led away in handcuffs. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. Our neighborhood, Oak Ridge Estates, was what most would call a suburban paradise: manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and not a single holiday decoration out of season. Behind this picture-perfect facade was Sandra, the iron fist of our homeowners association. 5'4" with a perpetually styled blonde bob and always dressed like she was heading to a country club luncheon, Sandra ruled our community with unbridled authority and an arsenal of violation notices. I moved to Oak Ridge Estates 2 years ago, blissfully unaware of what awaited me. The first week passed without incident. Then came the knock at my door on a Saturday morning. "Your garbage can is visible from the street," Sandra announced without so much as a hello, her voice dripping with disapproval. Section 8, Paragraph 12 of our bylaws clearly states all waste receptacles must be stored out of sight except on collection days. She thrust a yellow violation notice into my hand. I glanced at my garbage can, tucked neatly against the side of my house, barely visible unless you were specifically looking for it. "I'll move it behind the fence," I replied calmly, already sensing this wouldn't be our last interaction. It wasn't. Over the next months, Sandra found issue with everything from the shade of my mailbox, apparently eggshell, wasn't the same as the approved classic cream, to the bird feeder in my backyard, attracts unwanted wildlife. Each complaint was more ridiculous than the last, but I maintained my composure, addressing each violation with polite compliance while documenting every interaction. The real trouble began when I installed my doorbell camera and dashboard camera in my car. I work in cybersecurity, so I appreciate having digital eyes to supplement my own. Sandra deemed my doorbell camera an invasion of neighborhood privacy, despite it pointing only at my own property. The dashboard camera, however, she couldn't control, though she tried, claiming it violated some obscure HOA rule about recording devices. The cameras quickly proved their worth. One Tuesday afternoon, I returned from work to find Sandra in my driveway, measuring the height of my grass with an actual ruler. My dashboard camera captured her trespassing clear as day. "Sandra," I called out as I exited my car, "can I help you with something?" She straightened up, ruler clutched in her manicured hand. "Your lawn is 10.2 inches. The maximum allowed height is 10 inches exactly." I smiled pleasantly. "I appreciate your thoroughness, but you're on my property without permission. That's trespassing." Her face flushed. "As HOA president, I have the right to inspect properties for violations." "Actually, you don't. The bylaws allow for inspection from public spaces only unless you've given 24-hour written notice." "I'd done my homework. I have you on camera trespassing. Would you like me to call the police, or would you prefer to leave now?" Her eyes narrowed to slits. "This isn't over," she hissed before marching away, her designer heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. From that moment, I became Sandra's #1 target. Violation notices appeared daily for increasingly absurd infractions, holiday lighting intensity exceeding community standards during Christmas, and my personal favorite, excessive birdsong attraction, because birds apparently liked my yard. The other neighbors watched our battle with a mixture of amusement and fear. Many had suffered under Sandra's reign but lacked the courage to stand against her. I became something of a neighborhood hero, though most only expressed their support in whispers, afraid of becoming her next victim. Things escalated when Sandra's nephew came to stay with her for the summer. Tyler was 10 years old, a bright kid who seemed perpetually bored under his aunt's strict supervision. I often saw him riding his bike around the neighborhood, looking for something, anything, to do. One Saturday, I was washing my car when Tyler rode by, stopping to watch me work. "Can I help?" he asked hopefully. "Sure," I replied, handing him a sponge. "Just don't get too wet." We were laughing and having a good time when Sandra's silver luxury sedan screeched to a halt in front of my house. She emerged like a storm cloud, face contorted with rage. "Tyler, get over here this instant," she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. The boy's smile vanished as he dropped the sponge and trudged toward his aunt. "What do you think you're doing?" Sandra snarled, gripping his arm tightly. "I've told you not to talk to strangers." "I'm hardly a stranger, Sandra," I pointed out. We've been neighbors for 2 years now. She ignored me completely. Get in the car, she ordered Tyler. What happened next still shocks me. Instead of opening the back door for the child, Sandra marched him to the rear of her car, popped the trunk, and actually started forcing the boy inside. Whoa! I shouted, rushing forward. What are you doing? You can't put a child in the trunk. Mind your own business, Sandra snapped, struggling with Tyler, who was understandably resistant. He's muddy and wet from your little car wash, and I'm not having him ruin my leather seats. It's just for the 3-minute drive home. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sandra, that's dangerous and illegal. You can't transport a child in a trunk. I'm not going to let this happen. Her eyes flashed with fury. You have no right to tell me how to handle my nephew. This is a family matter. By this point, other neighbors had noticed the commotion and were watching from their driveways and windows. Sandra, perhaps realizing she had an audience, suddenly softened her approach. Tyler, sweetie, it's just for a few minutes. I'll drive slow, she cooed in a saccharine voice that fooled absolutely no one. The boy looked terrified. I stepped between them and the trunk. No. Either he rides in the back seat, or I'm calling 911 right now. For a moment, I thought Sandra might actually try to physically move me. Instead, she yanked Tyler toward the back door of her car. Fine. Get in, and don't touch anything. We'll discuss your disobedience at home. She glared at me with pure hatred. And you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. As they drove away, Tyler's worried face peered at me through the back window. I stood there, shaken but relieved that I'd prevented something potentially tragic. My relief was short-lived. The retaliation was swift and severe. An emergency HOA meeting was called the very next day, where Sandra presented a list of my alleged violations that would have taken a normal person months to compile. She proposed a series of punitive fines totaling over $3,000 and suggested my dangerous interference in family matters warranted considering legal action against me. Most of the board seemed uncomfortable, but, as usual, nobody dared to challenge Sandra directly. They approved a smaller fine of $500, which I immediately contested, citing the HOA's own bylaws regarding reasonable notice periods for violations. The following week was tense. Sandra drove past my house multiple times daily, clearly monitoring my every move. I caught her taking photos of my property on several occasions. I kept my cameras running constantly, certain that sooner or later she would cross a line. That line was crossed on a Wednesday afternoon. I was working from home when my doorbell camera alert pinged. The live feed showed Sandra and Tyler approaching my front door. Sandra looked determined while Tyler appeared nervous. I opened the door before they could knock. Sandra, Tyler. I greeted them with deliberate politeness. What can I do for you? Sandra pushed Tyler forward slightly. Tyler has something to say to you. The boy looked at his feet. I'm sorry for getting your driveway wet when we were washing your car, he mumbled, clearly reciting a script. That's really not necessary, Tyler. You were helping me, remember? If anything, I should thank you. Sandra's smile was tight. Well, we just wanted to clear the air. Tyler understands now that he needs to respect other people's property. I nodded slowly, noticing Tyler's downcast eyes and slumped shoulders. Something wasn't right. Is everything okay, Tyler? Before the boy could answer, Sandra cut in. Everything's fine. We should be going now. She turned to leave, pulling Tyler with her. Actually, I said, I'd like to speak with you about the HOA meeting on Sunday. The fines you're proposing aren't in line with the bylaws. Sandra's false pleasantness evaporated. The board has made its decision. Pay the fine or face further consequences. I stood my ground. I've submitted a formal appeal, as is my right under the bylaws. I expect it to be heard fairly. Her eyes flashed with that now familiar fury. You think you're so clever with your appeals and your cameras and your rule quoting. Let me make something very clear. I run this neighborhood, not you. People who cross me always regret it. I kept my voice deliberately calm. Is that a threat, Sandra? It's a promise. She turned sharply and marched back to her car, practically dragging Tyler behind her. This time, I had my phone ready and followed at a distance, recording. They reached her car, parked at the curb. What happened next made my blood run cold. Once again, Sandra popped the trunk and tried to force Tyler inside. "I told you what happens when you don't behave," she was saying, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet afternoon. "This is what you get for embarrassing me." Tyler was crying now, resisting. "Please, Aunt Sandra, I don't want to go in there. It's dark and it scares me." "Get in the trunk now, or you'll stay in there twice as long," Sandra hissed, losing patience. I had seen and heard enough. "Sandra, stop right now." She whirled around, spots of angry color appearing on her cheeks when she saw me recording. "Put that phone away. You have no right." "What I don't have is the right to stand by while you endanger a child," I replied, already dialing 911. "Which is exactly what I'm reporting right now." Sandra's face contorted with rage. "You wouldn't dare." 911, what's your emergency?" came the dispatcher's voice from my phone. "I need to report a woman attempting to force a child into the trunk of her car," I stated clearly. I gave our address and a description of Sandra's vehicle. Sandra abandoned her efforts with Tyler and stormed toward me. "Give me that phone," she demanded, attempting to grab it from my hand. I stepped back. "The police are on their way, Sandra. I suggest you stop making this worse for yourself." Her response was to slap me hard across the face, an action that was captured perfectly on my still-recording phone. Tyler gasped, and I staggered back, shocked by the sudden violence. "You've ruined everything," Sandra screamed, all pretense of composure gone. "I'm going to destroy you for this." I kept my distance, rubbing my cheek. "The police will be here soon. We can all explain our sides then." Something in Sandra seemed to snap back to reality. She grabbed Tyler's arm again, but this time opened the back door and roughly shoved him inside. "We're leaving," she announced, slamming the door and rushing to the driver's seat. "Sandra, don't," I warned. "Running will only make things worse." She ignored me, starting the engine and peeling away from the curb with tires squealing. I quickly returned to my own car, knowing I couldn't let her take Tyler when she was this angry. I followed at a safe distance, keeping the 911 dispatcher updated on our location and direction. Sandra was driving erratically, taking turns too fast and running through a stop sign. My dashboard camera recorded everything as I narrated our position to the dispatcher. "She's heading east on Maple Street, now turning south onto Oakwood Drive. She's driving dangerously with a child in the car." 3 minutes into the pursuit, we stopped at a red light on Main Street. Sandra was trapped in traffic with nowhere to go. Through my windshield, I could see Tyler's frightened face in her back window. Then, a police cruiser appeared, lights flashing, and pulled up behind Sandra's car. The officer approached cautiously, and I watched as Sandra gesticulated wildly through her window. My phone pinged with a text from a neighbor who had witnessed the initial confrontation and had apparently also called the police. "We told them everything. All the neighbors saw. We've got your back." The light turned green, but the officer motioned for Sandra to pull over instead. For one tense moment, I thought she might try to flee, but another police car appeared from a side street, effectively boxing her in. With obvious reluctance, Sandra pulled to the curb. I parked some distance behind and watched as the officers spoke with Sandra, then with Tyler separately. One officer examined my footage, both from my phone and my dashboard camera, which had captured Sandra's attempt to put Tyler in the trunk and her subsequent assault on me. The inevitable happened. Sandra was handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser. The shock on her face as the officers read her rights was something I'll never forget, a mixture of disbelief, fury, and the dawning realization that her actions had real consequences. Tyler was taken into protective custody while authorities contacted his parents, who apparently lived out of state and had been unaware of how their son was being treated during his stay with his aunt. At the station later, I learned that Sandra was being charged with attempted child endangerment, assault, and reckless driving. The officer informed me that this wasn't her first brush with the law. There had been previous complaints about her behavior, though none had resulted in charges until now. 3 weeks later, At the preliminary hearing, Sandra sat stiffly in the courtroom as the judge denied her attorney's request for dismissal. The prosecutor announced that Sandra was facing up to 5 years in prison and fines exceeding $20,000. When the judge ordered her to surrender her passport and set bail at $50,000, the color drained from her face. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed loudly, earning a sharp rebuke from the judge. As she was led away, her eyes found mine in the gallery, filled with a hatred so intense it was almost tangible. But for the first time since I'd known her, that hatred was impotent. Sandra Wilkins, former HOA president and neighborhood tyrant, had finally encountered something she couldn't control, manipulate, or bully: justice.